Welcome to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast, where we discuss all things wellness.
I'm Eleni Welch, nutritionist.
And I'm Kay Boyer, health enthusiast. Welcome back, Renegades.
Welcome, Renegades.
Welcome. We are back in the swing of things, post-baby.
Post-baby.
And we've got some good topics. And Eleni is here to get my eating back on track because I derailed this summer. So I'm here for all the lessons. I want it.
Yes. Well, today we're going to talk about your brain on sugar.
Oh my.
Do you remember those like anti-drug ads that were like, this is your brain on cocaine. This is your, did you ever see? Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes,
this is
scared me. Yeah.
This is your brain on sugar. How sugar becomes addicting.
Yes. I can totally testify for that just personally. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember, like, did you ever look at that graphic where they showed you the spider webs, the spider that was like on all the different drugs and how he built his web?
No, but okay.
The most erratic one was the spider on caffeine, which I
love the DARE program.
It always made me laugh so hard. Like, so he built a better web when he was on meth than he did when he was on caffeine.
So I shouldn't have coffee or I should have meth.
Yeah,
I don't know
if you're going to choose one, apparently you'll be better focused with meth.
That's funny.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not promoting doing meth.
No. Disclaimer. No.
Disclaimer.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Before we dive into it, hello to our listeners in Poland.
Poland.
What's up? Here's some fun facts about Poland I did not realize before, but Marie Curie was actually Polish.
Okay, wait, I don't know that. I'm so
okay.
not
I was going to make a joke about how if you pop culture, she was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize.
Okay. What did this amazing woman do that I should know
I was
about?
like, at the beginning of this, I was going to make a joke like, and for those of you who live under a rock, Marie Curie is. Kay's got us.
That is very fair.
Kay's got us started off.
I am under a rock for sure.
Okay. Marie Curie was a physicist and a chemist.
Oh, very smart lady.
She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. She studied radioactivity.
Okay.
And she was actually the first person to win a Nobel Prize in two different sciences.
Get it.
So not only was she the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, but of every human being, man or woman, the first to win.
I remember your name now. That's amazing.
Yeah, so she studied radioactivity specifically for therapeutic purposes.
Cool.
Yeah, so she's contributed to a lot of our scientific understanding of how you can use radioactive materials today.
Wow. Mm-hmm. This is so useful. So like 1950s, you think?
When did she win? That's a good question.
I don't know. We can Google this.
I forget when she won.
That's okay.
Yeah, anyway.
That's amazing.
But yeah, she set the stage, and her husband did a lot of studying, and I think they were actually the first people to isolate radium, I think, as a element.
If they have babies, their babies are geniuses.
Yes, her husband died pretty...
Wait, you know so much about her. Like,
I love Marie Curie because she was like a pioneer for women in sciences.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But I think her husband died kind of early.
Okay.
I don't know how long they were married, maybe a decade before he passed away. But I don't know if they had kids.
Okay.
I guess I didn't study her personal life so much.
Yeah, the science and her changing the world, which is amazing. Cool, very neat. Very neat. Well, thank you, Poland, for giving us her.
Yeah. Here's another fun fact. Mushroom foraging is a popular activity in Poland.
Yum.
And children are taught from a young age how to recognize edible mushrooms and distinguish them from poisonous mushrooms.
That is very useful.
Very useful.
Yes.
I was like, wow, we had a whole episode on mushroom foraging, and all of our listeners from Poland were probably like, come on, guys, we're like a century worth of steps ahead of you.
Yes, my 3-year-old can do it better than you.
Like, wow, you guys are grown adults and you can't identify mushrooms.
Yep.
And my toddler is picking them.
App, and we still can't quite get it right on the app. Like, is it this one on the app or this one on the app?
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, awesome.
Yeah. So way to go, Poland.
Thank you, Poland.
Mushrooms.
You're all very smart over there.
You are. You produce smart scientist women, and you know how to forage mushrooms. So
yeah.
What more could you
all
want?
Things we respect. Yeah.
All right. So we'll get into this is your brain on sugar. Because our sugar cereal is by far our most popular episode series.
Okay, people care about sugar.
They do. Those 3 episodes alone have amassed over 4,000 listens.
Wow.
So it's our most popular episode. And
well, this is our spin-off episode for you.
yes, obviously this is a topic you're all interested in, clearly. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the addiction aspect of it today.
I'm feeling that addiction. Because then once you start, it's even hard. Then it's harder to stop. You know? Okay. I can't wait.
Yeah, so we'll talk today about what sugar does to your brain, how it does it, and then how that can build an addiction and what you can do about it.
Good. Just practical tips.
Yes. So our brain instinctively craves sugar, which is a remnant from an age when sugar was scarce. If you've ever wondered, like, why do we crave sugar? It's because at one point it was an evolutionary advantage to crave sugar because sugar is one of the body's and the brain's main sources of fuel. And the brain is the most energy demanding organ in our body and takes up to about 50% of the body's sugar for energy. Wow. So because there was a time when sugar was scarce, we evolved to crave it.
When the vending machines were empty. That's right. in the cavemen days.
That's right. Yeah, so we evolved to crave it because our brain needed it and it was hard to find. And so when you did find it, you wanted to eat as much of it as possible.
Okay.
Which still happens today.
Yeah, when I find it in the cupboard, I need to eat as much of it as possible.
Except that it's not scarce anymore, so...
Oh my gosh, that is true. So true and hilarious.
Yeah, and in reality, today, it's actually a lot harder to avoid sugar than it is to find sugar. So to put it out there at the beginning, the inability to quit sugar isn't necessarily a lack of willpower. It's more from not understanding why we crave it and not finding the most effective methods to quit.
Wow. So no shame.
No shame. That's right.
We're here for you.
Although willpower is a part of it, and willpower, as we've talked about in other episodes, is a finite.
Yes.
It's a finite entity.
Yes.
So we actually don't just have limitless willpower. We start the day with a certain amount of willpower and it depletes over the day.
Yes.
So
Yep.
making good choices.
Yep. Set yourself
first
up for
thing.
Success.
Exactly. Yep. Because the more we have to test our willpower, the less of it we will have. And so by the end of the day, then you may be eating Oreos and
7
a
p.m.
bucket of ice cream because you've literally exhausted your source of willpower. I just think that's so interesting.
That is
I never get
interesting.
tired of that fact.
Yes. Yes.
So evolutionarily speaking, in nature, it was an advantage to favor sweet foods. Sweet tasting foods in nature are generally healthy, things like fruits and vegetables. If you haven't been binging on sugar or had any added sugar, yes, vegetables are actually sweet. And fruits are sweet, and they would have been a good source of calories, and they would have been a good source of brain fuel. And so nature produces them as sweet to encourage animals and people to eat them and pass on their seeds. So sugar in nature was actually a sign that something was healthy. Toxic foods, on the other hand, oftentimes taste bitter or sour because they're spoiled or they're rotten in nature, and they lack sweetness. So avoiding bitter and sour foods and seeking after sweet foods was at one time a survival mechanism.
That's why children are the way that they are. Wow.
And sweeter foods tend to be higher in calories, which is why children and adolescents prefer sweet foods because they have higher caloric needs during their growth spurts, which typically kids are growing kind of nonstop from the time they're born until the end of puberty. So it makes sense why kids instinctively crave sweeter foods.
Wow.
Which
and
is no
don't
longer
like
an
more of the
advantage.
bitter taste that we are like trying to teach them. Like, no, you do like this.
Yes.
And you don't like sugar.
Right.
You're like, no.
No, I want sugar.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. Of course,
interesting.
you know, there's higher calorie foods like fat that don't necessarily have a sweet taste to them. But in the terms of things that nature would have just been growing out of the land.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, and then I'm thinking of like honey. But was that just more like the sweetest treat of the If they found that.
If they found that, I'm sure they would have stocked up on it.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that those things wouldn't have been available year round. So even things like berries and fruits that they would have found, that our ancestors would have found, were only available a couple months out of the year.
Oh, so they needed to ingest it all to get them through the winter.
Right. So
Got it.
they would probably pack on a lot of pounds prior to the winter, and then they go through the winter almost in a starvation, fasting state.
So we do the same in America, but then we just never starvation out in the winter. We
Right. Because then we have like Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's and then Valentine's Day, and we just continually bulk up through the winter. And then we hit the spring and we feel like we want to detox and cleanse, but that didn't used to be the case. We used to kind of detox all winter.
Yeah.
And sleep a lot too, right?
Yeah.
So, when we consume sugar, here's how it affects our brains. So we have receptors on our tongues that send sweet signals to various parts of our brain. And the brain pathways that it used are significant for pleasure, memory, and reward. So as those molecules follow that pathway, it triggers the release of dopamine, which can induce feelings of joy and happiness. So when we engage in activities that trigger dopamine release, we experience joy, we form memories, and we look forward to doing it again. That's a built-in mechanism in our brain, which is why we often associate fond memories with certain foods.
Ice cream.
Yeah. So tell me, why is it ice cream for you? Do you have a memory associated with ice cream?
Yes, my mom would make banana flambe, and we'd have it over ice cream on Sundays, and it was like the yummiest thing ever. And we'd all be as a family eating these sweets. Makes me so
Sounds
happy.
amazing.
So somebody comes to me and they're like, "You want banana banana Fosters?" I think.
Sure.
The one, yeah. And I'm like, "Yes, I need to have that."
Okay.
That is a core memory for me.
Okay.
Yes.
See, what a great example.
See, everyone go home and eat sugar.
Yes. Yeah, I think whether it's like your grandmother's warm homemade chocolate chip cookies or an apple pie on Christmas, or I was going to say ice cream after the pool in summer. I like Kay's memory.
Yes.
But
it's all delicious.
Whatever it is, those memories are actually tied to the dopamine release that is triggered by sugar intake, which allowed us to form those memories and crave those experiences over and over again. So far beyond craving sugar, often what we're craving is the warmth of that experience or the memory. Which I think is so important for understanding if you're going to tackle a sugar craving. It's not just about sugar, it's about the memory and the experience. So we'll get into why that can help you quit sugar in a minute. But first we'll continue in the science because that's my favorite part.
Yes.
Importantly, dopamine can also counteract stress by blocking the action of stress hormones such as adrenaline, which is why we so often crave sugar when we are stressed. So if you've ever had a stressful day, right? First of all, because stressful days deplete our willpower. But second of all, because say you're having a really stressful morning at work and then you are full of adrenaline, your body is trying to balance that adrenaline. You walk into the break room, somebody's brought in a box of donuts. What do? You eat the donut.
This is making so much sense, like connecting it to stress. Oh my word.
Yeah. And then it's, you feel guilty, right? Like normally maybe you wouldn't eat the donut.
Right.
But now you're stressed out and you're like, screw it, I'm going to eat the donut.
Yeah.
And then you feel terrible after you eat the donut, which
Shame
just
cycle.
contributes
Yeah.
to the problem because now you're stressed out because you got off of your diet and your body's craving more sugar because that's what sugar does. And because you're more stressed out.
Yep.
Isn't that crazy?
Right. And then guilt and shame and oh my.
Unfortunately, when we consume excessive sugar, which most Americans at least do,
Go big or go home.
it causes really unhealthy imbalanced brain chemistry. It creates an imbalance between that dopamine and adrenaline pathway. And while it may sound appealing to always be happy and be able to block the effects of stress, right? We know that stress is unhealthy for the body. So maybe some listeners now are like, well, what's the problem? If I consume sugar and it blocks stress, and stress is bad for the body.
Great.
Sounds like a win-win. But many people are unaware that excessive sugar consumption can lead to consequences very similar to drug abuse, because we don't want to totally block adrenaline in our body. It's a very important hormone and signaling molecule. So when there's an imbalance and we have excessive dopamine and not enough adrenaline, then our body is out of balance and we have some erratic behavior. Excessive sugar consumption triggers acute dopamine release. So it floods our body with dopamine, just like alcohol and cocaine and other addictive substances do. It's the same mechanism and the same end result. So remember that your body wants to maintain balance. So the more dopamine you flood your system with, the harder your body is going to try to reduce your endogenous or natural dopamine production.
Yes. And it lowers your baseline for on your regular life.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So over time, that results in a chronic decrease in dopamine levels because your body is constantly suppressing it. And eventually it learns, okay, I'm producing too much dopamine all the time. I'm going to decrease my, like Kay said, baseline. So the body is constantly trying to regulate that dopamine production, keep it from getting too high. And then our baseline lowers. And as a result, individuals have to seek larger quantities of things like sugar or whatever's triggering that dopamine response in order to experience the same level of pleasure. So maybe at the start, when you're a child, let's say, and you've never had sugar before, a tablespoon of sugar floods your system with this dopamine response. But as you continue seeking that experience, you eat more and more and more sugar. You want more and more and more sugar, and you don't get the same dopamine response. And it's not even that you're consciously making that decision. Your body is driving that desire.
This is all so on point. Yes. Same for drugs.
Same for drugs. Exactly. And then it leads to that addictive state. So when we are ingesting refined sugar, which is very different from the sugar we were intended to eat from nature in fruit, the sweet receptors signal the brain's reward system more effectively than it does when we eat fruit, which is what our ancestors' main source of sugar would have been, along with some honey. And you have to remember, the fruit that they were eating was not the cultivated varieties we have today. It was wild fruit. So it was wild berries, crab apples, things that if you have ever had them, are not actually that sweet, right? They would have been sweet if you'd never had refined white sugar before. But, you know, we have wild cherry trees growing along our driveway. I really like the taste of them. I think they're an acquired taste, but they're very, very small. They are smaller than probably like a pinky fingernail for me. And they're kind of bitter. And they're all the concentrated flavor of cherry without necessarily a lot of the sugar with it.
Made my mouth water.
Yeah. And then they have a pit so the flesh on them is very small. So those are wild cherries. Those are things we took and cultivated and made bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Same with crab apples, right? Crab apples are really small. They're really sour. They're a little bit bitter, but then we took them and we found the sweetest fruit and we crossed that and crossed that and crossed that and crossed that until we ended up with what's today is like 1,000 varieties of cultivated apple. Right? Yep. But those aren't the fruits our ancestors were finding. They were finding these small,
not as sweet,
much, much lower calorie fruits. So the sugar content that we're eating today not only outstrips today's modern fruit, which is far more sugary than the fruit our ancestors ate, right? But it way outstrips the fruit our ancestors would have been eating. So you can imagine that the levels of dopamine we release today is far beyond what we really evolved to handle. In 2023, there was a study published in the journal Nature that showed that when a person drinks a sucrose solution, so sucrose is one form of sugar, there's glucose, fructose, sucrose, all of those, right?
All the oses,
lactose, galactose. So when somebody drinks a sucrose solution, multiple regions of the brain's neurons become activated, which are the same regions that activate when that person is injected with cocaine. I want to know who signed up for these studies, but
That's funny.
I think I would have been more afraid of getting like the sucrose solution than
Yeah, cocaine ain't so
I
bad.
saw how that spider built that web on cocaine. It wasn't that bad. Just kidding. I'm fully kidding. I am not promoting drug use. So is sugar more addictive than drugs? Well, not only does sugar stimulate the brain to produce dopamine, which brings joy, but it also triggers the production of our endogenous opioids in the brain, which can lead to addiction and dependence. We talked about this in another episode. The brain itself produces opioids. They don't just come from external substances. So far beyond eating too many poppy seeds, our body actually produces its own endogenous opioids. So the brain has glucose receptors, and when they are stimulated by sugar, it triggers a series of signaling pathways that ultimately lead to the production of addictive substances within the body itself. And this mechanism cannot be turned off or stopped, right? You wouldn't want to stop it. It's an inherent part of our body's system. But if you abuse sugar, you're going to order the brain reward circuit in a negative way. Mm-hmm. The same you would do as you used heroin or cocaine or any other addictive substance, even alcohol. So an animal study where mice were involved, they fed mice large amounts of sugar intermittently and then blocked them with a drug that blocks opioid, and the mice exhibited symptoms of drug withdrawal. So they had teeth chattering, forepaw tremors, and head shakes, just like a person does when they're coming off of drugs, and it was only sugar that they were on.
Whoa.
Yeah. But when they were chronically having that endogenous opioid production from the sugar consumption, then they could block that and cause those withdrawal symptoms.
Wow.
So sugar's effect on the brain is not only similar to drugs, but it's even more alluring in certain circumstances. In a series of animal experiences over the years, we've determined that when given the choice between cocaine and sucrose, rodents in animal studies routinely prefer the sucrose and will take that over cocaine. Isn't that crazy?
That is wild. And it's on every shelf in the grocery store. Wow.
And in every product in the grocery store that's packaged, including things that really shouldn't have it.
Right. Why did they add that? Wow.
Like salad dressing.
Literally.
Yeah.
Corn syrup was the number one in my salad dressing the other day when I checked. I was like, the number one ingredient.
Yeah, things like ketchup and salad dressing and condiments and packaged goods. Yes.
Come on.
Hey there, Renegades. Eleni here, briefly interrupting this episode of the Renegade Nutrition Podcast. I wanted to highlight a company that Kay and I have recently discovered that we love, and that company is Bulletproof. Bulletproof sells high-quality nutritional supplements, and every product that Kay and I have tried from them personally, we have found to be excellent. It's important when you choose a supplement that it contain the bioactive forms in order for it to be effective, and Bulletproof has just the right forms in just the right amounts. Right now, if you go to bulletproof.com and use the code RENEGADE15 at checkout, you can receive 15% off your order. That's Renegade, RENEGADE 15. Use that code at checkout to get 15% off, and we'll earn a small commission too. Thanks for your support. All right, back to this week's episode of the Renegade Nutrition Podcast. So when we overconsume sugar, just like we experience with other drugs, we experience a high, which then is followed by a low. Because we overproduce dopamine, our body tries to course correct, and so then we end up with a low. So if we do this over a prolonged period of time, we experience that dependency on sugar because we want to avoid that low, right? So just like drug users, when they're experiencing that high, that's what it takes now for them to feel happy. Then they hit the low, they want to avoid that. So they continuously take that drug in order to avoid the low. Well, that's what we do with sugar. So we consume sugar, we experience that high, then we don't want to experience the low. So our body craves more sugar after a certain amount of time in order to help avoid that low.
Wow. I'll say, which this is about coffee, not that, but my high school biology teacher, he had like 6 vats of coffee a day, always on it, right? And we were like, oh, let's have coffee. And he was like, don't have coffee. And we're all like, hello, you hypocrite. You're drinking. But he actually said that to us. He was like, the more, if you have coffee, you're going to feel high, but your high is going to dip down as low as that high was. And so he in high school taught me, as high as you get is as low as you're going to get.
Yeah.
So that was one. So I don't drink coffee. And that's one lesson why I didn't, because I thought, I never want to be so dependent on that for happiness or energy. I want my baseline to stay high. And I chose that 20 years ago, and I'm glad I did.
Way to go, high school teacher.
Right? Thank you.
Way to teach others.
Thank you, addicted high school teacher.
Yeah. Use your problems to teach others. That's good. Yeah. So when there is a deficiency of dopamine and endogenous opioids, which is caused by your body naturally lowering those substances in response to overconsumption of something that floods your body with them, it results in a person feeling sad, confused, sluggish, and unable to concentrate, all of which then further drive the desire to consume more sugar. And I can't tell you how many times I hear people say that, like, oh, I need it for energy in the afternoon, or if I don't have it, I just can't focus. But actually what's driving that is the consumption of sugar.
Wow.
So numerous human studies have also demonstrated the link between sugar and addiction. A prospective observational study published in Addiction Biology in 2021 revealed that a significant proportion of individuals with alcohol use disorder experienced an increased craving for sugar during their inpatient alcohol detoxification. So 40% of individuals who were in an alcohol rehab facility while they were detoxing showed a increased craving for sugar.
Wow, like a replacement drug.
Yes, like a replacement drug.
Interesting.
So they didn't have alcohol available to them, so they started craving something else that was available. And then that does maintain the addictive circuitry, right?
Yeah.
So you may be replacing alcohol with sugar, but you're not actually breaking the addiction problem.
Wow. Gosh,
So that's a big
almost
problem.
need those rehabilitation centers, like, what can we do instead of donuts for breakfast?
Right.
You
Well,
know,
just
like,
don't have donuts, right? You don't
Yeah.
have to replace it with anything. People can just learn to eat food that nourishes them.
Yeah, eggs and bacon, friends.
Eggs and bacon. Another study published in the journal Addiction showed that children with a family history of alcoholism and depression were likelier to prefer intense sweetness. On average, these children opted for water with a sucrose concentration of 24%, which is equal to about 14 teaspoons of sugar in a glass of water. Gross.
Oh, yeah.
Which is more than twice the concentration of sugar you would find in a regular, like, fountain soda. In contrast, children who did not have a family background of alcoholism craved water with a sucrose concentration of 18%. So still high, but 18 versus 24%. So even children who have not experienced alcoholism but have those genetics in which they tend to, because as we know, addiction does seem to be a genetic. People who are more prone to addiction tend to have the genetics that cause it, right? There's a reason why.
Yeah, some people it affects more than others.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's multiple reasons why alcohol abuse tends to run in families. There's environmental and endogenous reasons. But it's interesting that inherently kids who have never been exposed to alcohol still craved sweeter substances, showing that they have that more addictive nature.
Wow. Sugar water, yikes.
So the keys to overcoming addiction there's multiple tools that you can use. And I think the first one is to know your sugars, which we discussed somewhat in our Sugar Cereal Part 3 episode, How to Quit Sugar. But as that is our most played episode, I want to cover it again. The first way to overcome sugar is to know your sugar. So it's an unfortunate fact that modern diets, especially for those who are following the standard American diet, are filled with highly refined sugars, and it's hard to avoid, right? So obviously the first step in overcoming some amount of sugar consumption is to change from a standard American diet to a more wholesome diet. Pick one, anyone.
Any other?
Paleo, ketogenic, Mediterranean, whatever you want. However, research has found that our bodies also are less triggered by certain sugars, so less likely to follow that reward pattern and that dopamine release with certain sugars than with others. So not all sweet substances can create a dependency like sugar does. In fact, some sugars and sweet substances are natural and even beneficial to the body. I will say if you have a very serious sugar addiction, it may be best to go cold turkey. We talked about that in that episode, because if you're still eating sweet things, it's not really, you need to reset your body's expectation of what's good food and what's sweet. So if you're still consuming, a lot of sugar substitutes instead of regular sugar, you're not really retraining your taste buds. So you're going to continue to seek out those really sweet foods. But if you cut it out completely, even for just 21 days, you can retrain your taste buds as to what tastes sweet. And then after that time period, those sugary substances you were eating before will taste way too sweet. But you've literally dulled your taste buds to them over time so they don't taste as sweet. So when you give your taste buds a chance to reset, you can actually detect what's naturally sweet and what's too sweet. And then make sure to listen to our episode, Everything You Need to Know About Alternative Sweeteners, because we really cover all the alternative sweeteners and their health detriments and benefits in that episode. And I'm not going to recap that whole episode because it was a whole episode on its own. But in brief, my top recommended alternative sweeteners are in order: honey, which is raw and unheated, so unprocessed honey, raw honey; monk fruit or stevia. Stevia or monk fruit. I kind of oscillate between which should be second, which should be third. Molasses, maple syrup, coconut sugar, and sugar alcohols. So those are the top 7 that I would recommend as alternative sweeteners. Monk fruit and stevia kind of go head to head in my mind. Sometimes monk fruit beats out stevia. Sometimes stevia beats out monk fruit. Honey is the number 1 if it's raw and unheated. It contains enzymes, proteins, trace minerals, flavonoids, and other polyphenols. Increasing evidence indicates that honey is actually a functional food and has a lot of physiological benefits. Human studies have shown that honey intake can increase serum antioxidant levels, reduce inflammation, lower LDL, which is our quote unquote bad cholesterol, which I don't believe in, but an imbalance between LDL and HDL cholesterol can be a problem. It raises our HDL cholesterol, which is our quote unquote good cholesterol. It lowers triglycerides, and it lowers C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation. Honey also has antibacterial and antiviral activity, and it may actually have anti-tumor and anti-mutagenic effects, so it may prevent tumor formation.
Amazing.
So, honey has some benefits. Yeah, exactly. Which is interesting because honey is the sweetener produced naturally in nature without us altering it, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that the thing we have naturally in nature without having to alter it or process it at all has all of these beneficial health effects, because maybe we were made to eat that food as opposed to, the plants that we have to grow in mass quantities and then grind up and heat up and dry. And like I said, I always recommend using raw honey, which will have the enzymes and nutrients intact, because heat destroys those nutrients. Stevia has also become one of the most popular natural sugar substitutes. Stevia does come from a leaf. We actually grow some at our house. If you chew on the leaves, it's sweet.
It's sweet. It's crazy.
It's crazy. I've given some to Kay. It's hard to keep stevia plants alive outside because the animals all eat it.
Because it's so sweet.
It's sweet.
You're addicted to it.
Yeah. I have this little stevia plant that I've been just nursing along, and I put it outside and it got eaten. It regrew, putting it outside, and then a chipmunk came and ate it, and then a groundhog came and ate it, and then one of our chickens ate it. Everything was just eating it, and every time it regrew, an animal would eat it.
But you have such happy animals around your farm now.
Sugar raises our blood sugar levels, but stevia can actually lower them. In fact, in ancient times, stevia was used to treat what we know today as diabetes.
What? My brain is broken on this. What? That's awesome.
Yeah. And then monk fruit contains compounds called mogrosides, however you pronounce it, that are 250 times sweeter than sucrose. So you can consume far less of it than you would sugar, which is part of what makes it a better option. It's also rich in vitamin C and flavonoids, which are a type of antioxidant. And the components it contains have anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and anti-cancer effects. They decrease blood sugar, total cholesterol, and triglycerides, and improve glucose and fat metabolism. So these sweeteners, especially monk fruit and stevia, may not affect brain chemistry the same way sucrose and glucose molecules do because they're a different structure. So they may not have the same addictive effects. However, like we talked about, if you're really trying to break an addiction to sugar, one of the most important things you can do is reset your taste buds. And so just replacing sugar cup for cup with monk fruit or stevia, first of all, can lead to some gastrointestinal distress, but second of all, will not help you reset your taste buds. So you want to lower your dependency on sugar, and some of that is taste, because your body is now adapted in a way that things don't taste as sweet to you. So you need more sweetener in order to enjoy the food. So you need to reset that. Yeah. So still need to be used with caution. The second key to overcome a sugar addiction is to understand what it is you're actually craving. And I love that Kay shared that story right at the beginning of why she craves ice cream, right? Because you associate it with the bananas Foster, you associate it with those Sunday afternoons at home, cozy with your family. What we're actually craving oftentimes is an experience or a memory.
Connection and people.
Yeah, and we may not even realize it. We don't know why we're craving ice cream. We don't know why we crave muffins or chocolate or any of those things. But if you really trace it back, you may be able to find, because every birthday, my mom would put out M&Ms.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
It's warm at grandma's house.
Yeah. It's
cinnamon roll rolling.
Exactly. And it's the memories, the time you spent with grandma making those cinnamon rolls, or the time you spent, piled in front of the TV on a Friday night watching a movie and eating a bowl of ice cream. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is find new ways to access those memories or recreate that experience without sugar.
With carrots. We're all going to get together and eat warm carrots.
Warm carrots.
Doesn't quite do. I'm like trying to think of what could we eat? Bacon. I'm going to replace all of it with bacon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all it takes honestly is building new traditions that don't center around sugar. So for example, if you crave sugar because let's say ice cream, right? Mm-hmm. And you crave ice cream because your mom and you used to eat ice cream and watch a movie together on Friday nights when you were a teenager. And that's an enjoyable memory for you. And now you're grown and you're out of the house and you have your own family and maybe your mother's passed away and you just miss those memories, right? Yeah. It brings you back to this really warm, safe time in your life. You have all these requirements on your life now that you didn't have when you were a teenager. Mm-hmm. What you're really craving is that moment in time, the warmth of that memory. So it's important to create a new tradition that brings those feelings of warmth. So maybe you have your own kids. So start a Friday night tradition where you watch a movie and share homemade popcorn with butter and salt. Butter's good for you. Yes. Or a charcuterie board with a loved one or some friends.
That's good.
Because I think, food builds memories, right? Yes. You can replace the unhealthy foods with healthy foods and still center a memory around it.
Those are great.
Yeah, maybe you crave cookies because you associate them with your grandmother's house, being at your grandmother's house, or making sugar cookies with her during the holidays. So instead, during the holidays, rather than baking sugar cookies with your children or your friends, try making homemade ornaments or collecting fall leaves to make a wreath, or making some sort of new tradition. Maybe you always go to a pumpkin patch and then you carve pumpkins together. That's one of my favorite friend memories. We always did that. Our friends have moved away now and I miss them a lot, but that's one of my favorite things. Was during the fall, we would always go to a pumpkin patch and we would get pumpkins and then we would all go to our friend's house and we would carve them and watch Halloween movies.
I love it. And I just roast the seeds.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I crave that memory. So it's not built around sugar. It's built around that experience. So create those experiences again. Yep. If you have a lot of memories tied to something like apple pie on Christmas, invite friends over for an ugly sweater Christmas party, an ugly Christmas sweater party, and decorate coffee mugs or make homemade gifts together. You can do things that don't involve food at all, or you can replace those foods with healthy options.
And that charcuterie board is a brilliant idea for all of those
snacks. Because I love charcuterie boards. Oh my gosh, they're fun. You could go to You Pick Farms and pick fresh fruit with your family and your friends, or do like we said, going to like a pumpkin patch, or just something where you're building new traditions, you're creating new memories, and there are other ways to produce dopamine, and, loving contact with people releases oxytocin. That's something we crave too. That helps us form these fond connections. So there's other ways to create traditions that are enjoyable besides sugar.
Yes.
And then, start your kids young on a lifetime of memories that don't involve sugar. So include them in these activities. If they come home from school and they're craving a snack, make them apples with almond butter or peanut butter and cheese. Something that's a nourishing snack instead of, a plate of homemade cookies, which kids may crave because school can be stressful at any age, right? Maybe they're getting picked on. They come home, they have the warm chocolate chip cookies. They're creating a memory now around something that contains sugar. So give them the warmth of your love and your attention and a healthy snack. And that's ultimately, creating that safe space where they feel loved and cared for. That's what's going to create those memories.
Yep.
Versus the dopamine hit.
Right.
that creates those memories.
Right. I've been trying to do better after school snacks, and I've started doing like chips and salsa or nachos and meat sticks or bananas with, I put a cachava over it and some Lily's chocolate chips, which are stevia. So it's so true. Like the after school snack is so easily sugary, but I've really had to think of like, okay, what is a non-sugary after school snack?
Right.
Yeah.
Because if they have a bad day at school and then they come home to the warmth of a loving home, but they're having sugar, that's what they associate the memory with.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then remember that sugar is okay on special occasions.
Yes.
Definitely when my husband and I go out, for our birthday or an anniversary, we just went out. When did we go out? My dad was here and we got a piece of cheesecake, or if, that's like his favorite food. So if we are celebrating his birthday or an anniversary, he'll get a piece of cheesecake. I don't care. I mean, cheesecake is a good choice if you're going to have sugar because it's got a lot of fat and protein in it too.
Delicious. So good.
But, it's okay on special occasions, but limit it to that. That's what makes it special. And you don't have to be crazy about it. If you have a really intense addiction and you just want to go cold turkey, nothing, and you're afraid that if you have it even on special occasions, it will re-trigger you falling off the wagon, then don't have it. That's fine. But for most of us, it's okay on a special occasion, and saying you're never going to have it again is difficult for a lot of people. So versus doing that, just save it for special occasions, and then that makes it exactly that, special. And I think it's important to teach kids that too, how to moderate sugar intake. Let them have it on special occasions. Say no to yourself. Yes. Yeah, and do let them have it on special occasions, and then they kind of start to self-regulate themselves because they're not afraid of it, or they don't feel like they can never have it. I do, I've witnessed children whose parents are very strict on it and they never get it. As soon as they're out of their parents' house and they have access to it,
it's like
they like binge on it, and then they get really sick.
Yes.
So teach your kids how to moderate it themselves.
Absolutely. And this conversation reminded me, I follow a fitness girl on Instagram, but they were talking to her about how to eat right after you do a binge night. And then she's like, I do let myself do that on the special occasion. And she's like, but watch out, because it's going to take 2 to 3 days to get yourself really back on your rhythm. And she's like, so just know the next 2 mornings, you're going to force yourself to eat a healthier breakfast, because then it tripped on that idea of like, oh, well, now I want cinnamon rolls for breakfast. So she's like, as much as you gave yourself that leniency, then you have 2 or 3 more days. You got to be a little more stricter on yourself to reset yourself. Because like, that's so true.
Yeah, because your body's craving that dopamine reward now. But if you are maintaining that balance regularly, you're not triggering that pathway.
Yeah. And I definitely feel that myself hard. I'm like, no, okay, we just got to break this. No more,
Yeah, it is easy to get stuck in that again, that reward pattern.
Yep. Yep. For sure.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have for you. Hopefully that was helpful. But like I said, we do also have 2 episodes on this, the sugar cereal part 3, how to quit sugar, and then our comprehensive guide to alternative sweeteners. So make sure that you listen to those episodes. I think it's everything you need to know about alternative sweeteners, in which I get more, if you're looking more for information about alternative sweeteners, that episode is a good one.
Well, thank you again, Eleni. You keep me honest and you got me back on the wagon. I'm going to eat charcuterie all day now.
Yes.
And call it good. No, thank you so much. And it feels so good to be back on the podcast.
Yeah.
And thank you, Eleni.
Yeah, you bet. And to our listeners, thanks for listening, and
go be renegades.
Go be renegades.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast.
Please keep in mind that this podcast is an educational service that provides general health information. The content on this podcast is not a substitute for direct, personal, professional medical care and diagnosis. You should always talk to your doctor before making a dietary or lifestyle change. Go be renegades!
Go be renegades!